Okay, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and redo the video that I originally did on this one because I gave you some erroneous information based on my ignorance. This is my SCT 31. This is a Radio Shack brand or realistic brand, and this is a 3-head cassette deck, believe it or not. It was available from 1981 to, probably halfway through 1982. I don't think Radio Shack sold a lot of these. But this is an interesting deck made by Hitachi, I believe. I bought one of these, or actually my parents did, for my birthday in 1981 when I turned 17. So I actually had one of these, though this is not the same one that I had at that time. And because this is a 3-head cassette deck, and I can show you this right here, 3 heads, you are able to record and play back simultaneously and monitor the recording simultaneously as it's being made. And this also has double Dolby, which encodes and decodes simultaneously. And you can see some of the controls here really quick. There's the bias adjustment on the left, the tape formulation EQ bias knob over there kind of in the center, and this has some settings that really aren't workable anymore because the tape is no longer available. Ferrochrome is one of them, and then of course metal, you can see that. Those two formulations you can't really get. Obviously you can get all these tapes on eBay, but the ones that are most plentiful are normal tapes and chromium dioxide, CrO2. Those are the 2 tapes that I use with this. If you're going to use tapes with this particular deck, probably the best ones to get are these right here. I know some people don't like the Maxell UR60s, but overall I've had excellent recording results with these. These are high quality standard tapes or normal tapes. And then for the chromium dioxide tapes, get the Maxell XL2s. Those are excellent as well and will net you excellent results if you record them with this particular thing. Now, one of the complaints about this deck, and I had the same thing too, is that it didn't really perform in the high frequency end. And that was surprising because, once again, this is a 3-head deck, and so the record and playback heads are specifically cut, or the gaps are cut in such a way that they're optimized for what they do. And I think record heads have a narrower gap, playback heads a longer gap. But the problem with this deck is that it didn't really come adjusted correctly from the factory as far as I was concerned. So when I got this deck on eBay a few weeks ago, I got it for about 75 bucks. And the fast forward and the rewind didn't work, so I went ahead and replaced 2 out of the 3 belts. This is a 3-belt system, and that still didn't fix it. So I had to go in to the tape and remove this panel right here and access some of the rubber wheels. There are 3 of them in there. And I treated them with rubber renew, cleaned them up and all of that. And then the fast forward and rewind started working. So that was about the only thing that was wrong with the tape mechanism. As you can see, this is a manual deck, which is kind of surprising for a 3-head deck. Most of them are solenoid operated. But I really like that because there are fewer things to go wrong with this. And you can see the heads over there on the left is the record head. And then in the center is the combination record and playback head, and this is 2 separate heads right there. It's not one head. It's basically 2 heads that are side by side, joined together. So the record head and then the playback head. So this is a true 3-head deck, single Capistan. I'm not much of a I don't know, a salesperson for dual Capistan decks. I think they're not really worth it. You got to make sure the belts and all of that are good on both of the Capistans so that there's no slippage, because dual Capistan decks, in my opinion, can stretch your tape, destroy tape. They're usually harder on tape. So for the most part, I think single Capistan more or less is the way I like to go. But anyway, this is a really simple unit. The specs for this, 30 to 19,000 with normal tape, and that's probably with stuff like this or maybe a little better than this, and then 30 to 21,000 with chrome tape. And the problem once again was this thing never really performed very well on the high end. And I found, after removing the top, and it's just removed with 4 screws, that there's a little oscillator transformer, and it's all by itself, and it's over by the motor, kind of on the left side of the circuit board, all by itself. If you turn the oscillator transformer about a turn and a half clockwise, that puts the, I think, the erase oscillator in the sweet spot, and then the high frequency response comes back, and this thing records pretty adequately. If you put it beyond that, which, you know, you can experiment with it and put it maybe not a turn and a half clockwise, but maybe 2 turns clockwise, it'll split atoms and molecules. I mean, the high end will just woo. But for me, probably a turn and a half clockwise puts the erase oscillator. That's not the record oscillator, so I apologize. The erase head bias oscillator. So that's for that head right there, not that. In the sweet spot. And then your recordings are generally pretty good. The high frequencies are, for the most part, restored, and you can see where I have this thing set. I record a lot with normal tape, and again, Maxell UR, you know, some people don't like these, but the quality is still high. Maxell, I don't think, is making either of these, but they're still relatively plentiful on the internet, and so you can get them. You can look down here. Obviously, ferrochrome is not available anymore. Normal, you can still get. CRO2, chrome tapes, Type 2 tapes, still available. Metal, not really, but again, you can get these on eBay. But I would stick with Maxell tapes for this thing. I think overall, this was designed for formulations that were similar to these. So it performs best with those. So anyway, you can see some of the other buttons here. There's the tape and source. And again, because this is a 3-head deck, you can monitor and record on the fly. And you can make adjustments on the fly. Output level, and then there, of course, is the record level. I like this right here. This is the peak hold button. And what that'll do is, like anything, I think, over, I don't know, 70, 80 dB, it'll hold it there so that you can check the levels. And these meters, these record playback meters, are second to none. They're 16-segment LED meters. I mean, can you believe that? For both record and playback. And the LEDs are all separate. They're not grouped or anything like that. So this gives you a really good indication of where your recording and playback levels are. Just going back down here, you can see there's the left and right channel record. And then, of course, you know, you can plug in microphones and all of that. I mean, most of these decks had stuff like that. Hardly anybody uses it. Most of the use on this thing is done through the line jacks, record and playback jacks on the back of this particular unit. Just some interesting things about it, though. This is one of the few decks that Radio Shack made that uses discrete circuitry, that is individual transistors in both the record and playback amplifiers rather than, you know, op-amp chips and things like that. Because of that, this is unusually quiet, and because of that, the frequency range and the dynamic range is unusually good in this deck. And if you have a 3-head deck, especially with the technology that they had at this time, probably discrete circuitry, individual transistors, all of that was the way to go. This is probably, in a general sense, one of the better 3-head decks that Radio Shack produced, providing that you can adjust it internally. Some of these were not really adjusted very well at the factory, but I've told you what to do. Just turn the erase head bias oscillator transformer adjusting screw about 1.5 turns clockwise. And then this thing records really well. A lot of the high frequency response comes back. Providing that you have a good play record head, you should be fine. One thing really quick about the heads on these are ferric heads, not permalloy or anything like that. That's why they're so dark, but you can see kind of the split down the middle where the two heads are joined together, but that's a ferric head, and ferrics are darker in appearance. And I think they use these because these were the heads that could record with metal tape. And I think also these have higher saturation levels. So again, dynamic range, particularly in the high frequency range, is pretty good on these. Radio Shack, I think, made 5 3-head decks from 1979, I believe it was, up until about 1983 with their final 3-head deck. And this, I think, overall is probably one of the better ones for Radio Shack. You just need to know how to adjust it internally, but it's primarily the erase bias oscillator. And that's not the record bias oscillator. That's actually fixed. There are these little coils on the circuit board, and they're 85 kilohertz coils, and that's just where it is. So you can't really adjust that, I don't believe. But I think it's the erase bias oscillator. You can turn that thing high enough so it practically cooks the tape, but it gives you really pretty excellent recordings, and it brings out some of the 3-head capability of this deck. So anyway, just thought I would tell you a little bit about this. I'll get this posted quick and delete my other video which gave you some erroneous information. So this is Steve, and keep in mind too, I have another link to another YouTube Rumble site. I'm on both YouTube and Rumble. This one is called A Father's Devotions, and you might want to check it out. So once again, this is Steve signing off for My Audio Stuff.